Okay, let's start. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Planning Development Management Committee on Thursday, the 24th of September. Please note that the public session of this meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. And all attendees switch off their cameras and mute their microphones when not speaking. The microphone should only be switched on and the camera when you're invited to speak. Guidance on how to do this is contained in the guidance issued to you. I will now ask the clerk to advise the members participating today, and if all members could confirm their attendance once their name has been announced by the clerk so that it's clear in the recording of the meeting, and can also be recorded by the clerk for the minute. There's a number of items of quasi-judicial business for the committee's consideration today. Members are reminded that if they leave the room or the meeting during completion of any application, they are unable to participate or vote on that item when they return. Please advise the clerk via the meeting chat that you're leaving the room and therefore unable to confirm an item. If I could hand over to you, Ms. McBean.
Thank you, convener. So if we can just do our roll call to make sure everybody's present for the recording. So just see if you're here. Councillor Bolton?
Here.
Councillor Stewart?
I'm here.
Councillor Allen?
Here.
Councillor Cook?
Here.
Councillor Copeland?
Here.
Councillor Cormie?
Yeah.
Councillor Gregg?
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Here.
Councillor Malik?
Here.
Okay, everybody's present.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if we go on to the agenda, please. Can I just check?
Sorry, can I just ask a question quickly? I was going to say just during our roll call there. I just wondered, and obviously as we don't make that frequently, given that the next town planning committee meeting isn't until the 5th of November, and that is the same as the day of the proposed election, has the election date been postponed given the changes that we've got now? So it was just to know what to put in our diaries for the planning committee. I would have thought the election date would have been cancelled.
Okay, Mrs. Beattie, have you heard anything?
I haven't been aware of anything. It might be something that I'll certainly pick it up with Fraser Bell, who's the governance officer. As far as I'm aware, that hasn't been postponed at this point, but I'll certainly chase that with Mr. Bell, and I can put an answer around everyone.
Okay, sorry, convener, if I just may indulge, if it's not changed, does that mean we'll still be having the planning meeting in the morning as normal?
Okay, well, again, what we can do is if it hasn't changed, I can speak to the committee and see if we're reminded to continue with it, given there's a by-election. I mean, obviously, doesn't affect some of us, but I appreciate some of the other electoral parties may wish to be out. Well, I don't know if they'll be able to leaflet. So I think if we maybe find out a bit more, Councillor Stewart, and then we can let you know, because I think with some of the restrictions, I don't know if people are allowed to leaflet or anything. I'm not really.
Yeah, I just wondered how that is, and I'm sure other people are thinking the same. But anyway, thank you for that. I just thought we'd say at the beginning of the meeting in case we.
No, it's a valid point. I will check back with Mr. Bell and make sure that the committee gets circulated with an answer.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks for raising that, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you.
Okay. At agenda item 1.1, we have the motion against officers' recommendations procedural note. I assume everyone's got that. There's no urgent business at 2.1. Any declarations of interest? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which are pages 9 to 18. Can I take that as an accurate record of the meeting? Great. Okay. Committee planner at 5.1, which is pages 19 to 20. Any comments? There for noting. Okay, don't see any hands up. Okay, we'll excuse me, moving swiftly on to the reports. First is 6.1, which is Bing Hill House, which is a predetermination hearing, application 200750. I'll hand that over to Mr. Clark.
Thank you, convener. Item 6.1 relates to an application for planning permission in principle for the erection of an active retirement community, including a small-scale shop, cafe, community allotments and associated infrastructure. The application is before committee today to allow members to agree the application should be the subject of a statutory predetermination hearing at a special meeting of the Planning Development Management Committee, and considers whether the application is then determined at a subsequent future PDMC meeting rather than full council. Predetermination hearings are required in certain cases. Their purpose is to allow the view of applicants and those who have made representation to be heard before planning decision is taken. The Planning Authority have discretion over how hearings operate in its area. The application represents a significant departure from the current local development plan due to the site being zoned as Green Belt and Green Space Network. The site is zoned as the same in the proposed Aberdeen local development plan. Previously, this type of application, being a significant departure, was required to be determined by full council. However, following changes brought in by the 2019 Planning Act and the scheme of delegation review agreed by this committee in April, such an application can now be determined by the PDMC. A significant number of representations have been submitted. This includes 149 in objection, 2 neutral and 25 in support of the proposals. This brings it to a total of 176 representations submitted. It's noted that Cults, Fieldside and Miltimber Community Council have offered their conditional support for the proposal, and other consultee responses are detailed on pages 25 to 30 of the agenda papers. To conclude, the report before committee today seeks agreement that a predetermination hearing will be arranged in accordance with the council's instructions. A number of parties have already indicated that they wish to attend such a meeting. Thereafter, the application will be referred to PDMC or full council for determination, depending on the views of committee today. Any questions I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. As Mr. Clark has said, this is about deciding on where the predetermination hearing should take place. We heard that we obviously agreed under scheme of delegation and at our April committee that we should actually be holding it at PDMC. So my suggestion, unless there's any questions from Mr. Clark, would just be support the officer's recommendation at 2.1 and 2.2 on page 22, which is for the PDMC to hold a predetermined hearing and to make a decision at a further hearing after that. Can we get agreement?
Agreed.
Excellent.
Agreed.
Perfect.
Agreed.
Okay, we're moving on then to 6.2, which are on the roads, which I was supplied a number of photographs. Given the new measures that are being proposed for this development, I appreciate there's a number of conditions that have been attached. Do you feel comfortable with what's been provided as a solution to cope with the runoff of what is primarily fields at the moment, which will become hard standing as we move forward?
So, well, regarding the SADS basin, we are happy with the proposal. The developer proposed an extension of the existing SADS basin, which was accommodating the water coming from previous phase. I think it was phase, I can't remember the name of the phase. So it's going to be an extension of the basin, which according to the to calculations that have been submitted, we are happy with that.
Okay, all right. As I say, I appreciate there's some additional information that's been conditioned, so that's helpful. Thank you for that. And we got any questions around that? No. Gosh, I feel like it's almost my turn today.
Sorry, Councillor Cormie's got his hand up.
Oh, there you are, Councillor Cormie. Councillor Cormie, question. I can't hear you, Councillor Cormie. You're on mute, or?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you now, Bill.
The visualization of the site. Obviously, this is a 4 or 5 bedroom development. Quite a lot of children involved in here. There's no play facilities. Is there anything proposed for the kids in this site? There's nothing in this that I can see.
Yeah, then do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just come in on that. I'll see if I can get a plan up, but there is a children's play facility proposed on the southern section of the site. And we've also got a condition 7 on this consent, which basically just asks for full details of the children's play agreed with us before they're installed, but children's play facilities will be provided as part of this development.
Okay, that's fine, thanks. And one more, convener, is it?
Certainly, Bill.
Yeah, Core Path 87, would that be maintained by the developer, or how's that?
Gavin, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the core path which runs through the site, and there's potentially that would potentially need to be closed or rerouted while development's taking place, and it would be up to the developer to get those permissions in place. But there would be a road that runs through the site that would essentially still act as the core path once the development is completed.
Thank you.
Okay. Has anybody else got any questions? I've got a question. In terms of the continuation of the footpath in front of the development, how far is that going along, Gavin? Because there was a suggestion that some people wanted it to obviously join up with Fogton Woods, which a lot of the kids use, that goes behind the school.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously with phase 2, there was a footpath and a crossing put in, and on the sort of southern side of Kirkbrae, I think it's too narrow to sort of extend the footpath there. And on the southern side, it doesn't extend to Fogton Woods because there's a small triangle of land, which I think I've referenced in my report, that we don't actually know who owns that. We don't think it's the council, and we don't think it's the developer. So whilst it would be our preference to extend the footpath into that, and we could potentially use developer obligations to do that, there's potentially land ownership issues which might mean that we can't do that. So I think the aim is to investigate that, but we just can't do it as of yet because we don't know who owns the land and we don't know if we can actually do it. So it would be our preference to see that core path extended.
Okay, so we are going to be looking at it there, so that's
yes, I think we've had initial discussions with colleagues in environmental policy, and it's something that developer obligations could be used for, but we just can't say yes, we'll definitely use it because we don't know if we can.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Clark. The other point now, I know you have referenced it quite well in the report, but just for absolute clarity, there's concern obviously by existing residents there that their access is going to be temporarily stopped up. Now, there's nothing that the planning committee can do about that. Can I just have that in confirmation? Confirmation. I know.
Yeah, I mean that's a civil matter. There's obviously a road there that's potentially got ownership issues on, so it would be up to CALA and the owners of that land if there needs to be a diversion put in place or a stopping up order put in place to come to some form of agreement on that. So yeah, it would be up to them to do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Can I just double check? No more questions for Mr. Clark. Okay, the recommendations are on page 65. There's 11 conditions listed on pages 87 to 90, with 4 advisory notes on page 90. Is anybody otherwise minded?
Yes.
Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, I'm not comfortable with 2 aspects, which is the one relating to the overcapacity at local schools and also the affordability element. So I would move that we refuse based on concerns with these 2 elements.
Okay. Does Councillor Gregg have a seconder? No, I'm not seeing a seconder for you. Oh, Councillor Copeland, is that right? And Councillor Cook. We've got 2 of you. So I saw you first, Councillor Copeland.
That's good. I would basically formally second Councillor Gregg give me a chance to speak about it.
Okay. Obviously, we'll take an adjournment. Is Mr. Thompson with us?
Hello. Yes, I'm back in, convener.
Yeah. And perhaps Mr. Lewis, you could meet in a separate chat with Councillor Gregg and Councillor Copeland just to validate his amendment. And then
So can I do that now?
And if I'll just read out this statement as well for the recording, if that's okay. So for the recording, please note that Councillor Gregg has moved an amendment, and in order to review appropriate wording with officers for his amendment, the meeting will now be adjourned for a short period. Please note that the recording will continue. Therefore, this is a reminder to all participants to please switch off your microphone and camera during this adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, thanks very much, Alan. So you're back. Right, can I just make sure everybody else, I think, Lindsay, could you just perhaps make sure everyone's back? Just do a quick roll call, given we had to leave.
Okay, thank you, convener. If we can just indicate for the recording that you're present. Councillor Bolton.
Here.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Cook.
Yep, here.
Councillor Copeland. Councillor Copeland, are you back on the call?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cormie.
Yeah.
Councillor Gregg.
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Here.
Councillor Malik.
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms McBain. Councillor Malik, I notice you've got your hand up. Have you got a question that you'd like to ask?
Yes, thanks, convener. I just spoke to Councillor Allen, and she is having a problem with the connection. She cannot connect, and she is still trying her best, but she said you can carry on the meeting. She will connect whenever she can, but she's still struggling.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Malik. Thank you. As I said, we have the planning recommendations on page 65 with 11 conditions laid out on page 87 to 90 with 4 advisory notes on page 90. I'll be moving the officer's recommendation following the questioning that I had with Mr. Jones with flooding and with Mr. Clark today. It's a very difficult application, actually, mainly from the point of view of education. I've always had major concerns about the size of Cults Primary. However, Mr. Jones has given reassurances that the temporary classroom will no longer be needed by the time that this development comes on stream, that they will be below capacity. So for that reason, I find that it would be unwise for me to suggest that the primary school capacity is then an issue. We've heard that we've got developers' obligations to make any adjustments that's required at Cults Academy. So that's been satisfied. I'm extremely pleased that we have the level of conditions that we do on this application, particularly at conditions 1, 2, 3 and 4. 1 which pertains to obviously the water management and makes reference, which quite rightly, to the Cults burn, and the fact that there'll be no development works can proceed until sufficient information has been received and validated by the council. Because I know that there certainly was concern that we had quite a lot of water, obviously, during the flood, as most of Aberdeen did, but we want to make sure that any further development won't exacerbate the situation. We know that this development has already been zoned through the last 2 local development plans and is still in the plans. I'm very pleased to see that we've taken out the flatted property and put in terraced cottages type properties in its place. I think that's very welcome because we do need some smaller housing in the area, so this will meet that need. We've obviously heard a lot. I asked a lot about the pavement connection to Froggerton Wood, and I'm pleased that we'll be exploring that with our sustainable development team, possibly long term, but I know that they'll be looking at it to see if we can use the developer's obligation to make sure that that happens, because I think it's a well-used route, particularly by children in the morning going to school. I think the fact that, yes, we've got a temporary diversion on one of the core paths, but that it will still exist in a slightly moved over form. Disappointingly, that there will be some residents inconvenienced, but unfortunately we've heard from Mr. Clark, that that's not a matter that we can deal with in this planning committee and shouldn't take consideration of. And for we have what we have before us, and I think the scheme has been laid out, I think, in a reasonable manner. We've heard that it does address all the relevant policies that's been put before us. So I would just be moving, as I say, the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, convener, it's Councillor Stewart here. I'd happy to second you. I think you've covered all. Covered all the points actually eloquently. So I'm just happy to second you, and I'm also reassured by the comments regarding education and what Mr. Jones has said.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Gregg, would you like to move your amendment?
Yeah, thank you, convener. it's good to see the way that this application has developed over time. There's been a certain evolution in putting this together. I think in particular, it's been very welcome to see the efforts to ensure that the core paths network is improved, and hopefully in the future that question about expanding it into Foggyton can be dealt with as quickly as possible. But I still have remaining concerns about this application. The first one is on policy H5 on affordable housing. The report itself does admit that 25% of on-site affordable housing would be preferred. So I think that that's quite a strong indicator for us to support that aspiration. So I think that the commuted sum, whilst that would comply with policy, is just not adequate. I also have concerns about overcapacity at both primary and secondary schools. Although the primary school will only be over capacity by 4, that's still overcapacity. And Cults Academy will have 15 pupils in excess of what it can accommodate. So I just feel that policy there on education is just not being followed sufficiently. So I'm happy to move this refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Copeland, there we are.
Thank you, Convener. I'm more or less just formally seconding Councillor Gregg. However, I do totally 100% agree with him regarding the provision of affordable housing. Just because a development started off from being allowed to be 10% doesn't mean in subsequent years that should be allowed to.
Sorry, can't somebody shuffling papers?
Which is 25%. I think we're asking other developers with applications that are live now to provide 25%. I don't think it's fair.
Sorry, can I stop you, Councillor Copeland? Just 1 minute. Has somebody still got their mic on and shuffling papers, because it's turning out for Councillor Copeland, which I never thought I'd say, Councillor Copeland.
I think it was Councillor Gregg. I've muted him now.
Okay, carry on, Councillor Copeland. Sorry.
Do you want me to go back to start?
No, I think I got the gist of it, but I just wanted to make sure you had a clear run.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, we have to deal with things at the time they are made. The current rules say 25%. So I think we have a right to require 25% consent. Just because they get 10% earlier doesn't mean to say that you continue to get 10%. But from that point of view, I do feel that 25% should be required on this site. As far as education goes, I think it is marginal. We are projecting there will be no need for additional mitigation because the school's already overcrowded and won't be as overcrowded when this comes on site. It'll still be overcrowded, albeit greatly reduced numbers, but it's still overcrowded. And how many other applications are going to come in the meantime? We don't know. So from that point of view, I'd happily second Councillor Gregg. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Copeland. Can anybody want to join debate? Councillor Sure, your hand's still up. Do you want to pop it down for me?
Hi, convener. Can I say I'm back, but I will not take any part in this same item.
Okay, welcome back, Councillor Allen. Thank you for that. Has anybody got anything they wish to contribute? No. Okay, Councillor Gregg, would you just like to sum up?
As there's been no debate, I don't think there's any purpose in summing up. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just say a few words, just picking up on some points. I mean, Councillor Gregg and Councillor Copeland obviously alluded to the capacity at Cults Primary in particular, and I even mentioned it myself in my opening remarks that, you know, I always have had concerns about the size of Cults Primary, but we can't say that it will be over capacity because Mr. Mr. Jones said that it wouldn't be over capacity. So, you know, I think Councillor Copeland's saying it will be overcrowded when we're being told by officers that it wouldn't. And the fact that the temporary classroom would not be being used and wouldn't be there is what has given me the reassurance. I think if they've been trying to argue that it wouldn't be over capacity, but they're keeping the temporary per capita, I've had a different view on this application. However, we've been given assurances by Mr. Jones that the post cabin will not be there any longer, and that will bring this under capacity. That's the reassurance that I've been given over education, and that's what I'm going with. We've got a marginal increase in Cults Academy. However, we've been reassured by Mr. Jones that that can be mitigated with the sum of money that's being given. I heard Councillor Copeland talking about, you know, when legal agreements and Section 75s are drawn up, that, you know, it is at a point in time, and, you know, whether we like it or not, you know, that we have these agreements with developers. And it would be great if we could move things to our favour each time. Unfortunately, if it had gone the other way, I'm sure that the developer wouldn't have been arguing with us, or we wouldn't have been arguing with the developer. However, we have a contribution, and we also have 8 affordable housing units on site. As I say, we've moved away from flats, which I'm really delighted about, that we have proper housing that will integrate without being standing out. So I'm pleased that we have these affordable units on site, and that the affordable contribution will be used towards achievement of social housing around the city. So I think that's really, really important. Could be more, but we always want more. I think we have a report that's been put before us that has been long established in the development plan. So I think for me, our reasons to refuse it would be, I don't think strong enough, but I think it's obviously within our rights as councillors to make that determination. And say, I do understand where Councillor Gregg is coming from in terms of educational provision, but I do feel that we've been satisfied by Mr. Jones today. So I think I will just ask you to go to the vote now, Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener to approve the application in line with the officer's recommendation, and a refusal in the name of Councillor Gregg. And the reasons are that it was not adequate for the affordable housing aspect, and also the overcapacity at both the primary and secondary education. So can members please vote motion or amendment? Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Stewart?
Motion.
Councillor Allen is absent for the
No
vote.
vote.
Councillor Cook?
Amendment.
Councillor Copeland?
Amendment.
Councillor Cormie?
Motion.
Councillor Gregg?
Amendment.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Motion.
And Councillor Malik?
Motion.
Okay, the motion wins 5 votes to 3, therefore the application is approved conditionally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members, for that. If we can move on to the next application, which is at 7.2, which is for detailed planning permission for the erection of a Class 1, which is shops retail unit with associated car parking at Success, landscaping associated works at the land at Countesswells Road on pages 91 to 136, planning reference 200659. And we have Mr. Gavin Evans this time. Gavin.
Morning, convener.
Morning.
Thank you. Just bear with me a second and I'll share my screen and get the presentation up here.
Thank you.
There we go. Hopefully you can see that okay.
Yes, thank you.
Great, so thank you, convener. As you said, this application seeks detailed planning permission for the erection of a Class 1 retail unit with associated car parking, access, landscaping and associated works on a site at Countesswells Road, Aberdeen. I'll just start with a quick correction, I'm afraid. On page 121 of the agenda pack, the last paragraph on that page refers to existing shops at Manifield and Springfield Road as being more than 1 kilometre away, but that should actually read Seafield and Springfield Road, those being the 2 closest shops to the site. So apologies for the mistake there. So moving on, just flick forwards. The site lies on the northern side of Countesswells Road, immediately to the west of a new roundabout junction with the newer section of Countesswells Avenue, and directly opposite the access to Robert Gordon's College playing fields on the southern side of the road. I've got an aerial view here, which is quite helpful. The site extends to approximately 1.2 hectares and forms part of a wider area of land between Countesswells Road and Hazeldene Road. That's been the subject of earlier residential planning permissions, which are partially implemented at present, which you can just see in the area to the north of the site. And the area immediately to the north having been used as a sort of site compound, and then you can see the housing plots beyond that, which I think have progressed somewhat since that photograph was taken there. Sorry, I'll stay on that image, in fact. The site's bounded to the south by Countesswells Road and to the east by a footpath, which is part of the council's core path network, as well as a tree belt, beyond which lie existing residential properties to the east on Countesswells Crescent. Members will note from the following photos that part of the site has been utilised as a storage area for the adjoining construction site, and that part of the site lies underneath high voltage overhead power lines. You can't see those terribly clearly. You can just maybe make out the pylon just where my cursor is there. Perhaps see from the following images, you can just see the faint lines crossing the photo there. So from this view, looking northwards or broadly north, you can see the current green space at the Countesswells Road frontage with the Dandara compound behind and some new completed houses beyond that. You can faintly make out those overhead power lines, as I said, and it also shows the location of existing pockets of trees well along the western boundary, the eastern boundary, and there's a little pocket in the sort of southeast corner of the site as well. So flipping as well, so recently completed Dandara housing, you can see the sort of material store and site compound area that's been used there, and that gives you an indication of the pylons and the relationship with the Robert Gordon's playing fields on the opposite side of the road. It's a site plan as existing. Again, you'll note the overhead power lines just sort of denoted by these lines running through the site, the grey swathe, as well as the location of existing trees along the eastern and western boundaries, as well as in that dense cluster to the southeastern corner. The orange line on this plan, which you can just see running east to west, is an existing dry stone wall which would be dismantled, and the downtakings used in the formation of new walls as part of the proposal. So turning to the proposed plan, the proposed site plan indicates the location of the proposed store, which has a gross floor area of just over 1,800 square metres. In net terms, in terms of the trading space, that's 1,315 square metres, of which 1,052 would be devoted to convenience shopping and 263 square metres devoted to comparison shopping. Along with that come 101 car parking spaces, which includes provision for disabled and parent and child spaces, as well as 2 active electric vehicle spaces and a further 5 passive spaces for electric vehicles. So the active spaces are just denoted by these 2 icons here. So those would have a plug-in charging point, and then the further 5 here are served by the sort of ducting and cabling necessary to put in a charging point in future. So the underlying infrastructure is there. A single vehicular access point is taken off Countesswells Road, just to the central part of this image, midway along the site's frontage. The customer car parking is to the west of that access point, with a service yard, loading bay, and a small number of staff parking spaces to the east, allowing for servicing to be largely separated from pedestrian and customer movements. The formation of the car parking and service yard spaces does involve the removal of some existing trees, which are shown in the sort of red circles on this plan. The report discusses the extent of that impact and new planting and landscaping proposals in detail. A new path link would also be made to the adjoining housing development at the northwestern corner of the site. It's just shown by one of these arrows in here. So the paths within the car park and around the edge of it would connect through to the footway there. Excuse me. And lastly, a swale would be located to the east of the building. It's just this dotted sort of shape outlined there, used to collect and treat surface water from the site prior to its discharge. Next up, we have a plan showing proposed footpath works. This slide shows proposals for the provision of a new section of footway along the Countesswells Road frontage, not the frontage of the site directly, more a bit directly to the east. So this allows for the existing footway to be extended in order to join up with the site frontage effectively, and that allows onward connection to the bus services on, I believe it's Countesswells Avenue. Flicking forward to elevations, the store is a single-storey flat-roofed building of contemporary styling, which incorporates full-height glazing on the shop front to the west elevation, facing Countesswells Avenue, and high-level glazing along the southern frontage onto Countesswells Road. That reflects the internal layout of the store, where there's actually sort of shelf spaces and things in behind there, so there's limited scope for that to be full-height traditional shop frontage. The building would be primarily finished in white render, but also makes use of a stone cladding, which is seen elsewhere in the neighbouring Dandara development, so that assists in tying the thing together visually. Members should also note that the signage that's shown on these plans, perhaps more so on the next image with that high level one, does require a separate consent, which isn't within the scope of what we're looking at today. So flicking on to the next plan, this shows the extent of tree impacts. Again, those in red to be removed, and those in green retained, with the purple lines showing the extent of tree protection fencing intended to separate those from construction works and vehicle movements and things during the construction phase. A total of 54 trees were surveyed within and immediately adjacent to the site, with 9 to be removed to facilitate development. Replacement planting is proposed at a rate of 3 new trees for every 1 lost, so that'll be 27 in total. It's noted as well in the report that the majority of the trees to be lost are category C trees, reflecting sort of lesser landscape or ecological value and a shorter expected lifespan. Flicking on again, we've got the landscaping plan. This shows the extent of new planting along the Countesswells Road frontage here, just the sort of green areas, and up the western edge of the site, which will assist in screening the car park and offsets to some extent the tree removals required to facilitate development. The orange and turquoise lines, so orange just along the back here and the turquoise running down the western and southern boundaries, those denote the extent of new dry stone walls, which are intended to reflect the sort of character of the area and to again tie in with the sort of design approach taken in the wider Dandara scheme. Next up we have a visualisation from Countesswells Road. This shows the development from a point further west on the opposite side of Countesswells Road. It's annotated to say that this doesn't include the sort of visual effect of any new proposed landscaping, so that just gives you an indication of what everything would look like. It's noted that there is a previous consent on a portion of the site. So what was previously granted permission as part of the wider residential consent, the southeastern corner of the Pinewood site included houses, flats and retirement flats, which were intended for over 55s. The retirement block being contained in the larger 3 to 4 story block, which is just outlined here along the eastern side of the first plan, with car parking and landscaped grounds to the south, just shown here. The current proposal shifts the development footprint further south towards the Countesswells Road frontage. The second plan here shows the elevations of that same 3 to 4 story block to give you an indication of the scale and materials used in that earlier consent. Third slide's perhaps most useful in showing a side-by-side comparison of what was previously approved on the left-hand image against what's currently proposed to the right. So you can see there is a significant shift southwards to that Countesswells Road frontage, which in part is understood to be a result of the limitations around new buildings and particularly new residential dwellings around the overhead power lines, where there are restrictions on building underneath those, whereas there's a less onerous restriction in terms of the commercial or retail offering here. Sorry, one last point on this plan. On the right hand side, the grey section shown here is a sort of indicative proposal from the house builder for what could be to the north of the application site, but that doesn't actually have permission and isn't the subject of a live application as yet. So turning lastly to the retail impact plan, retail assessment plan. Firstly, just a minor oversight that's been brought to my attention is that the icons at numbers 4 and 5 have been annotated the wrong way around. So Seafield is shown as Manifield and Manifield is shown as Seafield, but otherwise there's no inaccuracy in the content of the report. So a detailed summary of the retail impacts and assessment against the relevant policies is contained within the report that's before members. In summary, this concludes that there's evidence of significant leakage in spend from within the catchment area, meaning that local residents are currently travelling out with the local area in order to meet their convenient shopping needs. Because there is because a store in this location would be capturing current leakage, the impact on existing local stores within the catchment is not significant. It's really just clawing that back from further afield effectively. In terms of retail policy, it's recognised that this site does represent an out-of-centre location, which the local development plan doesn't provide for unless specific criteria can be met. Officers are of the view that the proposal does satisfy those criteria as detailed in the report, and that the proposal would address an existing qualitative and quantitative deficiency in the local retail provision without significant impact on existing retail locations in the catchment area. In doing so, it would obviate the need for local residents to travel across the city to meet their convenient shopping needs and reduce the number of associated car trips involved. The site itself is also accessible by a range of options. However, it's notable that some 90% of the store's trade is expected to come from within that catchment area, reducing the need for car journeys further. In terms of representation, summary of the issues raised in representations is included in the report before members. A total of 149 valid recommendations were received during the period for comment, and of those, 87 expressed support, with 58 stating objection and 4 being broadly neutral in their content. In terms of consultees, there were no objections from statutory consultees. However, SEPA has indicated that connection to the public sewer system is a prerequisite, otherwise it would be minded to object. Officers have recommended that this be made a requirement through the use of a planning condition. Details of surface water connection are considered to require further justification. However, it's understood that a solution is achievable and therefore a condition can be used to secure a further scheme for agreement prior to any works commencing. A developer obligation sum of £2,827 has been identified in relation to the increased use of core paths in the area. That sum can be secured by a relevant legal agreement. In terms of noise from the development, following a review of the submitted acoustic assessment, environmental health colleagues have suggested that conditions are applied to limit the use of the deposit return facility, which is essentially a sort of bottle return where you get a sort of 20 pence return for that return. So to prohibit the use of that out with the store opening hours, and also a condition prohibiting deliveries out with the hours from 6 AM to 10 PM in order to protect residential amenity. The local community council's response reflects the differing views expressed locally, but indicates support in principle for retail development, whilst nevertheless querying some of the potential impacts. Officers have ultimately concluded that the proposal would, on balance, accord with the relevant provisions of the development plan for the reasons set out in today's report, and no material considerations are seen to be of sufficient weight to outweigh the plan on this occasion. And therefore, a recommendation is for members to express a willingness to approve with conditions noted in the report, subject to conclusion of a legal agreement to secure developer obligations. Thank you, Convener. Happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evans. I've got questions for Mr. Evans. Now, Councillor Cormie, your hand is up. I don't know if that's from previously or this one. Councillor Cormie, are you wanting a question? Your hand's up.
Yeah, Yeah, it's to declare an interest, convener,
Oh,
being a governor of Robert Gordon's College, because I see here that the road was shifted to ensure access to the playing field. I'd just like it to be noted that I'm a governor of Robert Gordon's College. I don't feel I've got to leave.
okay.
thank you.
All right. Councillor Stewart, I'm assuming that's the same for you, because I've noticed.
Exactly, but I would also be minded that we could go around declaring everything because we know everybody.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. Fine.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank
I
you.
did want to ask one question of Mr. Evans, though.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Whether it's now or later, it's
Okay, if I could just take Councillor Allen in, because she was slightly before you, and I'll come back to you, Councillor.
sure.
Stewart.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you. You mentioned the pylons quite a lot. What's the relevance to the application of the pylons?
Thank you, Councillor Allen. The relevance to the pylons is really just that they're a strong visual presence in the surrounding area, and they also have historically acted as something of an obstacle to development in this part of the site. That's really the sort of significance there. Hope that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener. I'll put my camera on, but I'm hesitant that I'll lose reception. I really just wanted a bit more detail about the impact of another supermarket and taking away business from other supermarkets. From the figures that Mr. Evans said, I figured it wouldn't have a detrimental impact on local business or existing businesses of that sort, supermarkets, but would probably enhance the area.
Yes, that's right, Councillor Stewart. Essentially, we're sort of balancing competing interests a little bit here, because on one hand there is, I think it's fair to say, a deficiency in terms of the convenience shopping offer in this part of the city. So our main concern is to ensure that there isn't a significant impact as a result of this new store on the existing neighbourhood centres that have been mapped as part of the local development plan. There are some existing out-of-centre locations, but in policy terms they don't have that same protection, if you like, in our assessment. But nevertheless, the retail impact assessment undertaken by the applicant has shown that there would be fairly modest impacts on most or on all of the existing retail locations within the catchment. And that is principally because at the moment, due to the deficiencies in the local offer, people are having to travel further afield to meet their convenient shopping needs. So the effect of it won't really be felt locally. It will be felt perhaps further away, where the big four supermarkets at the likes of Garth D would be losing a proportion of that trade, albeit that has been coming from much further afield than might otherwise be expected. I hope that helps somewhat.
Thank you. That does actually help. It clarifies my own thoughts. May I ask another one?
Certainly.
Thank you. Again, with Mr. Evans, it was just in reading through the report, one of the concerns raised by I assume residents, was that the potential loitering at the location. I assume that you can always get loitering in all sorts of areas, but that wouldn't necessarily have a negative impact on a supermarket. Just interested to know what planning would have to say about that. Thank you.
Sure. In terms of how we would deal with that in planning terms, consultation was undertaken with the Police Scotland Architectural Liaison, who provided some advice, and I think generally expressed the comment that the site was well laid out in terms of natural surveillance is the term that would be used, meaning that it's sort of surrounded by residential properties in some parts, but also has the natural passive surveillance from the presence of Countesswells Road and passing traffic. So it doesn't really have those same secluded, shady spots that might lend themselves to antisocial behaviour. So I think in terms of design and layout in relationship to its surroundings, subject to it being appropriately lit, there shouldn't be an issue there that would unduly encourage that sort of behaviour.
Okay. You're on mute, Councillor Stewart.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that. That was fine for me for just now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Cook.
Thanks, Convener. And first, I've got several questions on this one, falling into two categories. I've got a number of questions on roads and traffic, and then a number of other questions on flooding. Before I get into them, just like to thank officers for the very comprehensive answers they gave me to the questions I submitted on email, which will cut short the number of questions I'll ask. So if I can turn first to the whole issue of roads and traffic, there were a number of concerns expressed by those who put in representations about the impact on traffic. But can officers just confirm that neither our roads team nor Police Scotland consider Countesswells Road to have a particular speeding problem? I mean, you always get occasional car speeding, but we don't think it's a particular problem here. And also, can officers confirm that we've only seen one accident on that stretch of Countesswells Road in the last 5 years, and that was a minor one, not causing any injuries or major injuries?
Sure, thank you, Councillor Cook. I'll maybe start off and then hand over to my colleague, Mr. Cowie, just from our Roads Development Management team to sum up from his point of view. But in terms of that consultation with Police Scotland I mentioned before, they observed that the area is generally a low crime neighbourhood, and they gave a quick summary of the sort of nature of offences. And, you know, there had been a small number in relation to, I think it was vandalism, theft, housebreaking, but it was something like 19 over the course of the past 12 months. There was mention of traffic offences, however, it didn't. Their response didn't note the exact nature of those, so we don't know if they were specifically speeding. But 19 offences over the course of the year did seem like generally a low number. If we could just ask Mr. Cowie to just step in terms of the information he'd found about past accidents.
Morning.
Morning.
Well, with regards to the accidents, typically we would look back for an assessment of the last 3-5 year period, and previously.
You're breaking up a little bit, Michael.
Sorry, my signal seems to be cutting in and out throughout this meeting.
That's better. That's good. Carry on.
So to confirm, yes, there's been one reported incident in the past 3 to 5 years, which is the period we typically look at, and that was just a very slight incident involving one vehicle and no pedestrians or the likes. So I didn't have the exact details of how that accident came about, but as I say, it wasn't related to speeds or was just a one incident and very, very slight with no casualties. In terms of speeds, I spoke with our colleagues in the Road Safety and Traffic Management team who have not carried out any recent surveys on that stretch of road or have had concerns raised recently. It was too short a period to go and get up-to-date surveys carried out, but as I say, if there had been concerns raised to them previously, they would have carried out surveys. So in that sort of regard, I'm guessing they haven't had that raised. But we've got the 20 mile per hour part-time outside the area of Hall Primary School, which then it does go into the national speed limit further to the west of the site, which there was surveys done there where there was no confirmations of any speeding, or it was actually in fact below the speed limit. But as I'm aware, when discussing with them, and we haven't heard anything from police as yet that there is any speeding concerns in that area. But we could certainly look into that. With nothing we could do prior to this meeting.
Okay, Councillor Cook.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I mean, I've spoken to Police Scotland in the past about this area, and as I say, although you occasionally get cars that are speeding, they don't think it's a problem. I mean, they think it's a problem on Craigton Road, which is just to the south, but they don't have a problem here. So if I can then continue, so we've got a road which is probably, we don't think is particularly dangerous. We don't think there's a particular problem with speeding. We've got very little evidence of accidents. But obviously there would be more cars on the road as a result of the older development. But am I right in thinking that the increase in traffic is maybe in the order of 10% on a weekday? 200, 250 cars in the peak periods. So you've actually got a road which is relatively safe now, and will have a marginal increase in traffic, partly on the basis that a lot of the people who will use the Aldi store are living locally. A lot of them will walk, and in the peak periods, a lot of the custom for a store of that type would be, I'm sure what the technical term is, it's kind of drive by. It's people who are kind of on the way to and from work, and they nip into the supermarket on the way. So it's actually a marginal increase in traffic. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, so that was taken into my assessment on that basis, that while they note that there will be increased volumes during the peak period, my thought is that much of that will be either passerby, so already on the road network, and predominantly if it is there to serve that localized area, which they don't have retail of that size. So locally, if you wouldn't go out during the peak period purely to go to the shop, you would try and avoid going out in the peak period. So yes, lending itself to more passerby, and yes, as you say, it's more localized that people can walk or find other modes of getting there, cycle, whatever, that it lends itself to that and brings in so much more of that Pinewood development and existing Countesswells area.
Thanks, that's helpful. Last question on roads. The Community Council suggested that maybe a pelican crossing might be helpful. And if you have lots of kids going across the road to Airy Hall Primary, I completely get that. But can officers confirm that the Countesswells Road in effect is the boundary for the catchment area? So if you live to the north of Countesswells Road, you're in the catchment area for Hazelhead Primary, not Airy Hall Primary. So we wouldn't expect to see lots of kids crossing the road to go to school.
Yes, that's right, essentially, Councillor Cook. The Dandara development had initially, some maybe 10 years or so ago, been zoned for Airy Hall Primary, but I think maybe in the last 3 or 4 years, the school catchments were redrawn such that it's now entirely within the catchment for Hazelhead. So there shouldn't be that same movement of young people from the site to Airy Hall in that direction, if you see what I mean.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. That's all my roads questions. I think if we can turn to my flooding questions.
I knew there would be some, Councillor Cook.
I'm getting predictable in my old age.
No.
I've had actually, again, thanks to officers for clarifying a number of questions I had. The one issue that I've still got, actually not so what I'm looking for. There's a comment from SEPA on page 112 of the pack, where they talk about long-standing drainage problems in the area, some of which is related to field drains. And if I can find where I'm looking at, so I'm doing this on like two devices, so I can look at the papers on my iPad. Can officers confirm that it would be appropriate to put in an additional condition that would address the issue raised by SEPA? I've had some correspondence with officers ahead of the meeting, and it would be a condition that says if there's any land drainage encountered during excavations, those drains will be diverted. And if we find any groundwater springs during construction that can't be controlled by existing drains, those then get piped into the most appropriate watercourse. I think Mr. Evans has got the detailed wording on that, but could you just comment on that, please?
Yeah, sure, Councillor Cook. Just to put SEPA's comments into context, there are triggers for consultation with bodies like SEPA that this application didn't actually meet, so there wasn't a statutory obligation to consult with SEPA. But given the past issues with drainage and concern about drainage and flooding issues at the site, we felt that it was appropriate to do so. So really, in setting out our reasons for consulting them and explaining why we were doing it when we didn't need to, I had sort of intimated that, you know, there had been past issues that were understood to be to do with you know, historic land drains and things. So really their comments there are just in response to that, saying, okay, well, if you have this problem, this is perhaps the best way that you might deal with it. The condition that you suggest is one that has been used on other consents at Pinewood and Hazeldean. I think most notably the care home at the northern portion of the site onto Hazeldean Road. And really what that would just be saying is that in the event of construction and excavations, if you discover anything, this is how we would expect you to treat it, and you know, expect it to return it to its existing outflow point. So yeah, I think that would be a perfectly reasonable thing to apply here.
Thanks, that's really helpful. I think given the history of the site, I did have a bunch of concerns around flooding, but if we could put that condition in, I think that would largely allay the previous concerns that I had, and I think that's all my questions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Has anyone else got a question? I have, but I just thought if anybody else has got. Okay. Can I go back to it's probably Mr. Cowie. In order, the access point into the shop, in terms of from the road, is quite close to the roundabout, but it's also quite close to the entrance into Robert Gordon's. You're quite comfortable with that layout? I just wondered if that maybe actually maybe a little bit hazardous. I don't know.
No, I can confirm that we are comfortable with that configuration. They'd reached out to us at pre-application, sort of initial, and we're looking for a crossroads with the RGU, which we said we wouldn't be allowed that at all. And then yes, we want to have it offset adequately from the roundabout of Countesswells, whereas this is more of a minor access with the RGC playing fields, and this is how we are comfortable with that now.
Okay. Now I'm just a bit conscious that, you know, if there's kids over there, maybe there for the day, and they'll be wanting to nip over to Aldi's to get something. I just want to make sure you don't think there will be that conflict of just cars, but also foot pedestrians coming out at the same access point.
All right. Yeah. No, we didn't have concerns for that. It will during the day. Ultimately, a lot of that will be during school periods, and it'll be bused to and from for there, and they will be controlled in that environment. And then more at the evenings, the likes, it is just for sort of training sessions or sort of in the rugby practice. But yeah, we don't have any concern for that stage. Okay.
That's fine, thank you, Mr. Cowie. My next one's actually probably for environmental health, because it's about the noise from the delivery lorries. I know we've got a condition on delivery times, but I don't think I'd be very happy being woken up at 6 o'clock every morning with delivery lorries arriving with cages and all sorts. Could I maybe hear from environmental health, please? I think we've got Nick. Yeah.
Hello, Councillor. Yeah, I think it's just what was considered reasonable for deliveries, so that the store could also have its provisions in place before it opened. So they had to strike a balance then between what was practical for the store and minimising disturbance to the residents.
In terms of the distance, so between where they're going to be offloading and the nearest residential properties, you know, your experience, do you feel that that's adequate?
Yeah, it's quite a well-known thing for us to look at in terms of noise impact from deliveries. So the officer who assessed it was satisfied that that condition would be adequate in this case.
Okay. Mr. Evans, how far physically is it between the delivery point and the nearest property?
Yes, I think I've got a note here that the closest residential property, the rear of that, is in excess of 45 metres from the loading bay. The submitted acoustic assessment referred to needing to achieve a distance of 30 metres during the day to achieve the necessary sort of noise threshold, and 40 metres at night. So that provides some comfort that there's not a sort of exceeding of that expected noise level. Okay,
that's good, because I think the background or the ambient noise or whatever it's called in that area tends to be quite quiet, other than when I suppose the kids are playing rugby across the road. So it's just to make sure that we're meeting and exceeding actually what's required.
Yeah, just on that point, actually, if I could just add, in terms of the frequency of deliveries, the submissions refer to, the transport assessment refers to approximately 1 HGV delivery per day. The acoustic assessment was undertaken on the basis of 2, I think maybe on the basis of a worst case scenario. So we wouldn't be talking about a vast number of deliveries during the day, if you see what I mean. Yeah, well, let's hope if they're planning their drop-offs that they choose to do that one a little bit after 6 o'clock in the morning to give a bit of reprieve to the neighbouring people. Any other questions on this application? I'm not seeing any hands. No, okay. We have the officer's recommendation on page 109, which is to approve conditionally with a legal agreement. There's 16 conditions laid out on page 131 to 134. We've heard about another condition which Mr. Evans laid out for us in terms of flooding. So that would make it 17 conditions, and that will be added in. It relates to the potential flooding from springs, etc. There's one advisory note which is laid out on page 134 to 135. Is anybody otherwise minded? Councillor Gray?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would move refusal.
Okay, on the grounds of?
On the grounds of encroachment into the open space, problems with managing the transport impact, the difficulties in integrating retail activities into existing residential properties, affecting residential amenity.
Can I just check, has Councillor Gregg got a seconder? Councillor Cook?
I'm happy to second Councillor Gregg formally
Okay.
to facilitate debate.
Thank you.
All right. Well, can I ask you to do the same as you did last time, Councillor Gregg? And if you could meet with them and Mr. Lewis, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
Lindsay, do you want to read out your bit?
Yeah, thank you, convener. So please note that Councillor Gregg has moved an amendment, and in order to review appropriate wording with officers for his amendment, the meeting will now be adjourned for a short period. Please note that the recording will continue. Therefore, this is a reminder to all participants to please switch off your microphone and camera during this adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, folks, we'll see you in a few minutes.
Mary,
Can
I speak to you, please?
Yeah, do you want me to phone you, or do you mean over this?
It's to remind you that I require a sub.
All right, you've got to be away in about 3 minutes, don't you?
Well, yeah, 5-2.
Okay, so I think we should be done for this one. Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart, for reminding me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
always understood it because it's stupid bloody laws.
I think I see Councillor Greg is back. Huh? We have our officers back.
Convener, they're working on wording for the amendment.
Right.
So they'll be back very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Gail, do we know, Gail, if they're just about there?
I think they are.
Okay. Perhaps maybe I could start giving all elected members back. You comfortable for me to start, Gail?
I think Alan's just coming.
Okay.
I've given them a nudge.
Okay, thank you, Gail. They're going to be much longer, Mrs. Beattie, do you know?
I will send another message and just ask if we're ready to start.
Okay, thanks.
Convener,
Yes, Councillor Stewart.
hello. I'm actually still with you, but as you know, I have something that I have to attend.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact protocol, but am I allowed to give the way I intend to vote?
Well, not yet. I mean, are you on your phone? Can you stay on your phone?
I've now joined onto the Teams thing on my phone. Yes.
That's okay. You can continue on your Teams meeting on your phone. If you get to the thing that you need to do, then obviously you'll need to go. Appreciate that. We are chasing. It seems to be officers that are not back. Elected members are. So I think you bear with us just for a minute or two, Mrs.
I will, but I think I'll be at my destination.
That's okay.
Imminently.
Okay, appreciate that, Councillor Stewart.
Okay, I'll stay with you. I'll stay with you as long as I can.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart. I'm gonna put your mic off.
I've sent another message. Okay, I can see Daniel's icon. Are we back, Daniel?
He's still on hold, it says on my chat participants. Him and Alan. It's just I would have thought that would have been back given the members are back at some time. I'm assuming Councillor Gregg and Councillor Coote will have the principles of what they want to say. It's just fine. Oh, here's Mr. Lewis, you're back. Okay.
Yes. Hello, convener. Alan's just finishing off the wording of the motion, but has asked us to carry on meantime.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lewis. Okay, I'll kick off. We've got as I say, the recommendations on page 109 to approve conditionally with a legal agreement. We've seen now an additional condition add, so we now have 17, which covers the potential of any flooding situation. I think this has been quite a difficult application because obviously it's quite prominent in the development, but I think the landscaping and the types of materials that have been used have helped to, if you like, camouflage it. I do believe that it will be a welcome addition. I think we've seen the retail impact, which has given us reassurance that it's not going to impact on any nearby neighbourhood residential. It would be the larger stores down at the likes of Garth that may lose a little bit of trade. I think if you balance that out with it being a more convenient location for houses around that area, I feel satisfied that we should go ahead with the officer's recommendation. I think one of my concerns was obviously about any loss of amenity to nearby residents from any noises that the deliveries might make. However, we've got a condition in there which will hopefully alleviate that. But I think more reassuring is the fact that we're way under where we have to be, or word that correctly, that there's sufficient distance. In fact, there's more than sufficient distance that's stated between that and the nearest resident. There's obviously some trees, etc., in between that and a pathway to the nearest house that exists currently. So I'm reassured from Mr. Glover that won't be detrimental to the neighbouring houses. I think it's finely balanced. It's about the benefits that will bring the locality shopping that I think is much needed, particularly for older people who may want to walk along to the shop. So I think on balance, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
Yes,
Yes.
convener. I will formally second.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen. We've got now Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, convener. I'm very grateful to officers who have been helping to put my amendment together, and hopefully that will be there with us very soon. But I'll go through the points. There have been a considerable amount of representations in this application. There have been views expressed for and views expressed against. It's good to see the very high level of engagement with the public in this issue, and I think that it's quite noticeable that in the representations there was a longer list of those who had. There was a longer list of concerns and more details about concerns in contrast to those in support. Often a one-word mention of support, which isn't entirely convincing, welcome as it is for people to give their views. So first of all, the main policy which is guiding in this issue is D1, quality placemaking by design. In such a development as Pinewood Hazeldean, it is crucial to get design right, and it does need a strategic view. We had the Pinewood Hazeldean planning brief, which was put together after a great deal of effort, and that brief, although it's no longer valid, remains an important material consideration in planning terms, and it provided for the inclusion of some kinds of local services in that area, but nothing of this scale was envisaged. My key concern is about the scale and the character of this proposal. It's out of scale and it's out of character for the area. We're looking at a supermarket which is just under 1,900 square meters, so it's a considerable size, and it's clearly not intended just for the immediate local area. It's there to serve a very wide catchment area. There's mention of the 7-minute driving area, and by my calculations that would take you as far as Holborn Junction to the east, Woodhill House to the north, and Bridge of Dee to the south. So it's clearly aimed at being a very wide ranging customer base that this is directed towards, rather than just being a local shop. And I think that a local shop would be really welcome, something small scale and appropriate for the community would be really welcome. But this is just too large and not appropriate. The proposal, I also have concerns about the impact on policies NE1 and NE4 on the green space network and open space provision. What we're looking at is insufficient landscaping at the front. It's not going to mitigate the visual impact of that building and on Countesswells Road and on the local area. So I think that the visibility of the building will have a detrimental impact on residential amenity. Moving on to transport concerns, we have a requirement to manage the transport impact of developments, and the report and the transport assessment indicates the additional traffic that would be generated. by this shop, and it would be considerable, and it would be a cumulative increase in traffic volume in Countesswells Road, in Springfield Road, in the area, because it's attracting a customer base and business from far afield. So that increase in traffic movements is a huge concern as well. So I move refusal of this application.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'm actually intending to vote in favour of the proposal, subject to the inclusion of the extra condition. It is finely balanced. I was keen to facilitate debate because there has been a lot of local interest in this one, and there are pros and cons on both sides. I've got a degree of sympathy with a lot of the points that Councillor Gregg made. I was concerned about noise impact, but you've already addressed that, and I agree with what you said on that. I had some concerns around traffic, but having kind of drilled down into the background documents and having spoken to the guys from the roads team, my view is that there will be an increase in traffic, but it will be marginal. And for all the people who are kind of attracted in to the area and doing so in cars, we're also cutting down on people from that area driving off to the big Tesco on the Langstrath or down to Bridge of Dee. So I think on balance, I don't really think the traffic issue is as bad as some folk might have feared. I understand the fear, but I'm reassured about it. I get what Councillor Gray is saying about the scale. If this were the same scale as the big Tesco on the Langstrath, I'd be saying no way. But I do think the area is crying out for this type of amenity, this type of facility. I think on one of the previous Pinewood Hazeldean applications for housing, I voted against, and one of the reasons I voted against was there was no retail provision. So being consistent with what I've done before, I think I really ought to support this one. Again, there's my hobby horse issue of flooding, which is what, and the officers actually, I was about a bit confused on some of the background documents, but officers were able to clarify stuff for me. And with the additional condition relating to field drains, etc., I'm now able to support the application. If that condition hadn't been there, I would have had to vote against, to be honest. But now it's there. I think it is approvable. So yeah, that's essentially it. Finely balanced. I was swithering, but I've had the reassurances that I needed. And while I get a lot of the concerns, I think on balance, the area needs something like this. So I'll be voting in favour.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Does anybody else want to join debate? No, not seeing any hands. Councillor Gregg, would you like to sum up?
Thank you. I'll just first of all express my thanks to Councillor Cook for seconding me, and I appreciate and I agree that there are some aspects of this application which are finely tuned. So I absolutely get where he's coming from. I think that as I mentioned, it's the scale of this proposal which is the concern. We need local services, we need local shops, facilities, businesses, but of the right scale for the area. It's a residential area. It's a quiet residential area, and this business would generate a considerable increase in traffic into the area, which would add to existing and indeed increasing traffic problems. So I'm not against retail provision, by itself, but this isn't the right one. Thank you.
Thanks, okay. Just a couple of points. Obviously, we've heard a lot about the scale, but there was going to be a nursing home there, which was, I think, if I remember, 3 stories high. So it was a considerable size building. And I think that this lower building, which has got the white render and the stone that's being used already in the data development, will actually help it blend in. I think, you know, as everybody's alluded to, I think retail is welcome in that site. I think there was an indication that that should be provided. Obviously, for some people, it's on a bigger scale than they would be desirable, but I think on balance, I've been reassured in terms of flooding of the roads and of the environmental health from the noise perspective. So I would just ask you to support the motion. We go to the vote, Ms. McLean.
Thank you, convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener to approve the application conditionally and an amendment in the name of Councillor Gregg to refuse the application, and I'll just quickly read out the reasons. So in regards to the Pinewood and Hazeldean planning brief, the proposed retail development is considered to be contrary to D1, quality placemaking by design, in that the proposed retail development is considered to be out of scale to the residential development which it is intended to serve. Secondly, the proposed retail development is contrary to T2, managing transport impact of development, by virtue of generating additional traffic which would create adverse impact on the existing residential amenity and road safety. Thirdly, the proposed retail development is considered to be contrary to D2 in that landscaping along Countesswells Road would not adequately mitigate the visual impact to the amenity. And fourthly, in regards to the Pinewood and Hazeldean planning brief, the proposed retail development is considered to be contrary to NC1, NC2 and NC4 by virtue that the scale of the development is more appropriately located within a regional local neighbourhood centre. Can members please vote motion or amendment? Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Stewart?
Motion.
Councillor Allen? Councillor Allen? You're on mute, Councillor Allen.
No, I did say motion before I went on mute.
Sorry, I never caught that, sorry. Councillor Cook?
Motion.
Councillor Copeland?
Motion.
Councillor Cormie?
Motion.
Councillor Gregg?
Amendment.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Motion.
Councillor Malik?
Motion.
Okay, the motion wins 8 votes to 1, therefore the application is approved with the conditions. Thank you.
And that extra condition that Councillor Cook. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Stewart, you can escape now. Thank you for hanging on.
Thank you. Just I've been listening very intently on everything was said and happy with my vote.
Okay, thank you.
I'm still here actually, so I should be here for the next item.
All right. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Okay, moving swiftly on then to 8.1, which is the detailed planning permission for the installation of a security fence retrospectively at Stonywood Park, Aberdeen. It's on pages 137 to 150, planning reference 200656. And if I could have Mr. Forbes.
Thank you, convener, and good afternoon, members. Hopefully no more further technical hitches. What I'll hope to do is share the screen just now, so hopefully you'll be able to see my presentation shortly. Let me just pull that up. Hopefully that's it there.
Yeah, that's you.
Great, thanks. So this is, as you say, a retrospective planning application for erection of a security fence. It's actually located within an area of woodland lying adjacent to an established industrial premises at the east end of Stonywood Park. So that's the site area there. You may be just seeing the location plan, hopefully. So that the location plan includes both the existing industrial premises and the adjacent areas of woodland. So it's perhaps not entirely clear where the location of the fence is, but I'll just move on to that. This is the overall location aerial photo. So you've got extensive areas of woodland extending down to the River Don and a substantial woodland belt running along the south of the site. The actual area of the location of the fencing is at the east and southern boundaries of the site, which is the, if you look at the site plan here, this is the green line basically is showing the alignment of the fence as installed, which runs right along the edge of the south and east boundaries. The purple line here is the pre-existing location of where the security fence was previously prior to 2018. So that's obviously, this is the area of woodland is the area between the dashed purple line here and the green line of the fencing is the area of woodland, which actually lies out with the industrial premises. So what's happened is as you can see from the photos, the fence has been installed right along the boundary of the path, which runs along the forms part of the eastern edge of the site, and that runs through what is authorised open space in terms of the consented housing development at Stonywood. Particularly relevant here is the planning history, so I'll just briefly run through that. In 2012, planning permission was granted for a major residential development at Stonywood Estate for Dandara Homes, and as I say, as part of that consented development, the area of site where the fencing is located was to be developed as open space for the residents of the adjacent development, and was obviously laid out as open space, including the area of established woodland. In 2018, the fencing was erected by the applicant without planning permission. Obviously, there was an enforcement investigation undertaken at that time, which established that the fence was unauthorised. And following on from that, retrospective applications were submitted in 2019, and most recently the 191010 was refused at committee in October last year, and subsequently was then subject to an appeal to the Scottish Ministers, and obviously that appeal decision is a significant material consideration in terms of determination of the current application. Now this application differs from the appeal in that it's purely relating to the fence. There's no change of use and there's no physical development in addition to the fencing. So it's slightly different from what was previously refused. The other material consideration here is that a tree preservation order has been served in relation to the woodland on the site in an attempt to try and obviously protect the immunity of the woodland that's there. Now the development itself, it's a very straightforward industrial style chain link fence. 1.9 metres is the mesh height. The overall height is 2.3 metres, where you've got 3 mesh strands running along the top. So that's as shown in that detail there. In terms of consultations, Dyson Stonywood Community Council, who are the local community council, they object to the development, citing various planning policies and impact on amenity. And there's also 13 letters of objection primarily from local residents, and 1 letter of support, which sets out basically says that there's a antisocial behaviour issues with the use of the woodland. And in addition to the letter of support, there's been a representation received from the applicant, who claims that there's a security justification for the fence and economic reasons for approving it. In terms of the assessment, obviously the starting point is the development plan policies, and what we have, the site is zoned within the site of the fence is located within a residential zoned policy area within the adopted local plan, so it's not within an industrial area. It's also identified as green space network within the local plan, so policy NE1 within the plan is again of particular relevance. The other factor there is that the site is identified as part of the OP17 Stonywood housing designation. So and obviously there was a the Stonywood development framework and master plan, which was approved by the council in 2011. That obviously set out the development parameters for the development of the estate as a whole. And in terms of that plan, this part of the site was supposed to be maintained as open space. So for all those reasons, obviously there's fundamental policy tension there. There's also topic-based policies which are relevant and which we'll come on to. In terms of the assessment, obviously the starting point, as I say, is the development plan and other material considerations, in particular being the reporter's appeal decision of June this year, and the council's open space audit of 2010, which also identified the area where the fencing is, and the woodland as being as identified as open space in the audit. So in terms of the rationale for the recommendation, there's three particular reasons that this is considered to be unacceptable. The first issue being impact on residential amenity. So due to the industrial character and appearance of the development and its proximity to a well-used recreational path, which forms an essential amenity within a designated open space, the fence is considered to have an adverse impact on residential amenity of the area, and therefore conflicts with policy H1, residential areas within the adopted local plan. The second reason relates to loss of open space, or rather loss of access to open space. So the position of the existing fence results in unacceptable loss of access to the woodland area by the public, and obviously this forms part of the consented housing development as well, the open space, in conflict with the objectives of policy NE1, green space network, NE3, urban green space, and NE9, access and informal recreation of the local plan. It's also by preventing public access to the existing open space, which is required to be delivered as part of the Stonywood development. The proposal would conflict with the development framework, the Stonywood development framework approved in 2011. And lastly, the third reason is adverse landscape impact. So as the fence has been installed, is considered to have a significant adverse impact on an important local natural landscape feature, i.e. the mature woodland and the setting of the adjacent public path. The industrial appearance of the fence is particularly visually incongruous in the woodland setting, and resulting in detriment to the amenity and enjoyment of the open space area. And a further consideration here is that there's not been any change in material considerations or the physical context of the site since the planning appeal, the reporter's appeal decision in June this year. So for all these reasons, it's considered that there's no justification for approval, notwithstanding that the applicant is obviously concerned about security. It's considered that that can adequately dealt with through relocated fence line on the original consented boundary. Now, a further related point is obviously the enforcement situation, and as it stands, obviously we haven't served an enforcement notice because of the planning applications that have been, and appeals. The appeal that's been submitted at this point in time, there is no enforcement notice, but that would obviously be a potential consequence of refusal of the application. So I'm happy to deal with any questions, and I think there's probably further additional submission by the applicant that I'm happy to deal with any further questions related to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forbes. Any questions for Mr. Forbes? I'm not seeing any hands. I'll just double check my list. No hands.
Councillor Mackenzie has got her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Mackenzie. Thank you.
Councillor Cook as well.
Okay. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yes, Mr. Forbes, I don't understand why they want to have this area fenced off, because it's full of trees. And as you say, it's local amenity. It's very popular with the dog walkers, as I know. So why do they keep applying for planning permission for an area that's quite what's the word, densely forested?
Mr. Forbes. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean the reasoning. Well, security is given as the reason for the position of the fencing, but obviously there was previously a pre-existing fence of much the same construction. So I couldn't really speculate as to there's no actual detailed statement related to security concerns, but that was the reason that the applicant has given is provision of security. And antisocial behaviour within the woodland. But again, there's no evidence of that before us in terms of that being a significant problem in the area.
Thank you, Mr. Forbes. Councillor Cook.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I just wonder if Mr. Forbes could comment on the email which I think all of us got from the agent for the developer, really around the two issues of, one is what weight should be given to this letter back in 2018 where the planning team said no objection in principle, and also what weight, if any, should we give to the suggestion that this has lost investment in Aberdeen, which would have happened here, but is now going to Germany. I just wondered if you could comment on those two points.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Yes, I maybe take the second point first. The point about lost investment in economic activity, I think that's dealt with in the report to an extent, and it basically is, what we're dealing with here is an application for a fence, so there's no physical development as such. There's no increase in there's no change of use. So therefore it's difficult, I think, to conclude that there's any significant net economic benefit here, and there's no supporting economic statement as well in relation to demonstrating any net gain. But obviously the erection of the fence in itself, it's a retrospective application, so there's no physical activity associated with that would result in any kind of significant economic benefit. The first point about the letter, I think it's important to remember the letter it's from a former member of staff, and that was issued prior to the determination of the previous application in 2019. So the weight, it's questionable what weight that would have, if any, because obviously the reporter's decision in the determination of that application is really the significant material consideration here, and the reporter refused planning permission for both the fence and the various other elements of that application, which included change of use of land and physical operational development within the site. So that's really the key material consideration I would suggest in terms of considering the current application. Notwithstanding that, I'm sure the applicant is aggrieved by the fact that a letter was issued, and obviously there's separate means of actually taking that forward, potentially as a complaint if he so wishes. I mean, that's the separate procedure to deal with that within the council, separately from the determination process. So I think it's important to focus on the material considerations and obviously the development plan policy as a starting point.
Thank you.
Thanks, that's helpful. Nothing further.
Okay. Any other questions? No, I don't see anybody. Okay. We have the officer's recommendation on page 143 to refuse. I'll be moving the officer's recommendation. I think Mr. Forbes has been quite clear in what's before us. I would agree with Mr. Forbes that we're discussing a fence today, so I'm not quite sure how that has impacted on loss of investment, because as we've heard, the land within the fenced area, there'd been no request to change use of that, and there was previously a fence in the appropriate location, which I think would have dealt or hopefully met their requirements, given, as I say, there's no request to develop that site where the trees are. I do have a major concern about when we have development frameworks where we designate open space sites and they are subsequently sold off and potentially taken away from the purpose they were designed for as part of the brief, and I think that's something we need to look at separately. However, today I'm quite comfortable with the officer's recommendation, which I think has been reinforced by a previous appeal decision by the reporter, which is clearly mentioned in the report. So unless anybody's otherwise minded. No, I don't see anybody otherwise minded. So, but Mrs. McBain, could you just go through a roll call so we've got it for the record?
Certainly, thank you, convener. Those members can just indicate if they're happy to refuse the application. Councillor Bolton?
Refuse.
Councillor Stewart?
Refuse.
Councillor Allen?
Refuse.
Councillor Cook?
Refuse.
Councillor Copeland?
Refuse.
Councillor Cormie?
Refuse.
Councillor Gregg?
Refuse.
Councillor Mackenzie,
Refuse.
and Councillor Malik.
Refuse.
Thank you. The application is unanimously refused. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Right, that the only other thing on the agenda for today is obviously the meeting date of the 5th of November, which will come back to you if there's any change to that, or we'll let you know one way or the other. We've also got a pre-application this afternoon, which starts online at 2 o'clock for 2 sites, one at, where did we have it? Picked up the wrong board, that would be interesting. Sorry, one at Craighill School and one at the former Kingcorth Academy. So look forward to seeing you back all online at 2 p.m. Thank you all very much for this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.